Hey, well, good things come to those who wait. And finally, after fighting and clawing and kicking, am going to introduce my next guest, a good friend of mine. His name is Julio Briones. As I said before, he's a personal crisis manager. He's a prison consultant. He's an author and a lecturer. He's authored these two books, in fact, Redefining Success and Surviving Arrest. And he's also on New Jersey State Commissions with regard to criminal justice reform. And he does lots of lecturing. I've actually lectured with him. On his website, one of his statements is his mission is the guiding light in the storm of crisis to help clients find new definition of success along the way. And why is it that I am impressed with Julio Briones, and not just because of what he wrote in the lectures and having been with him? I call him a friend because he's intrigued me for another characteristic. Julio was sentenced to 39 years in state prison, and ultimately, due to his own work and fascinating story, wound up getting that reduced to 12 years. So hopefully I have a little opportunity to talk about that. He is a good man. He's got an amazing story to tell, and it's only from being in the trenches of an actual trial itself. Maybe some trial incompetency, perhaps not such good lawyering. It's so poignant, Julio, that we talk about, because we're kind of talking about that in this case, that you are now here sitting with me. I respect you, mad respect for your resurrection, if you will, and all the help that you're doing for other people. Welcome to the show, Julio.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Okay, and listen, you could not have come in and sat down, Julio, at a better point in time, because we are going to talk to you a little bit about something that I've never experienced, Chief Wagner's never experienced, you never experienced, and I know Gene Rossi hasn't experienced, and that's being called a criminal defendant at trial and sitting in that chair, and what's going through your mind and your brain. And often we talk about this in the Law and Crime Network because of a couple of bad things, maybe a bad pull of a judge, maybe a lawyer that doesn't know the case. Your life can take a drastic and dramatic turn. In the Van Dyke trial, I'm asking you chatters to go in there. One of you just said, I think it was Tostep may have said, that he was a bald-faced liar. Well, maybe if you didn't take the stand, that would have made a difference. Let's listen to Jason Van Dyke. Give us your thoughts in the chat room. Okay, so that's Van Dyke testifying in this case. By all estimations, myself, Gene Rossi, and Mike that were breaking the case down at the time, we thought he did, you know, a horrible job, did not assist himself. Julio, you're the guy that's been in that chair. And I know that, just to give the people a little bit of your background, you were never in trouble in your life. You served in the military. You got out kind of listless, trying to think about what you were going to do, started hanging out with a couple of guys, somebody introduced you to somebody else in a bar, and on one singular night you wound up involved in a scenario where a number of people were charged. Unbeknownst to you, everyone was given 5 to 7 year plea offers. I think it was a carjacking-ish kind of thing.
Yeah, carjacking, and actually 2 of them got probation deals.
Okay, so 2 got probation. You thought you had a real legal defense there because you were kind of just really standing by there. You weren't actively participating in it. You went to trial. You had a judge originally that was kind of down on the state's case. The judge changed because they had a heart attack. You got a very hard judge. I won't mention the name, but we all know who the guy is. And at the end of the day, your lawyer walked in, and it wasn't the lawyer you had throughout the case. It was like an associate who hadn't tried a case before, I believe.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he had just passed the bar exam a few months before he walked into court.
Okay, and you were very dissatisfied with that because you had paid. This was a privately retained lawyer. Yes. Some kid that's never tried a case comes walking in, and at the end of the day, those guys get probation in 5 to 7 years, and you get whacked with a 39-year sentence.
Yeah.
So tell me, Julio, what's it like sitting in the chair as a defendant when something like that's happening?
Well, it's surreal. There's really no way to describe what a person would imagine going through this. I sat there. First the guilty verdict comes down, and I just sat down. I couldn't even stand to hear the rest of the verdict. I started removing my personal effects so that my family could take it with me, and I was just in a fog.
Well, let me back up. When the case was being tried, did you think you had a shot, or did you anticipate you were going to get convicted?
Oh, I thought for sure I was walking out of there. The actual people who were robbed in my case got on the stand, both young ladies, one right after the other, and said, I'm not the guy that pointed a gun and robbed them. So I figured there's no jury in the world that's going to hear that. And one of them even got upset with the prosecutor in the case, that why does she have to keep coming back if she's already done 2 lineups saying that I'm not the guy.
Yeah, see, now this is very, like, we talk about prosecutorial discretion all the time and how it can make a huge difference. And the thing I told you, and I've told you this offline before, and maybe you tell a little story about how we became friends. If I were a prosecutor, Mike, I'll throw this to you real quick. If I were a prosecutor, and you got to have heart, you got to look at not just convicting people, where our oath is to do justice, not to seek mere convictions. And if I see a guy who is, by all estimation, a minor player in the incident, just kind of there, okay, maybe lending support, that could be the argument. And the guys who've got the actual robbery and the violence are getting probations in 5 to 7 years. And I have been in this position where I've convicted somebody of the highest offense and gone to the judge, gone to my boss first, and said, I think he should do half the time than the mandatory sentence. And our boss, you know, is always great at doing the just and right thing. He gets 39 years. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night as a prosecutor saying, essentially, he got 32 more years, let me factor it out for you for the reason, as a trial tax. Thoughts?
I'm actually listening to this story in amazement because as defense attorneys, Bob, we've been on both sides. This is a horror story, what we're hearing here. And the fact that somebody was getting that kind of time as a prosecutor, I mean, the most important thing we take our oath is to do justice. Guys are getting 7 probations, and you've got victims who are satisfied with where this case has gone, and you know this is a periphery person. It's shocking to me. It's shocking to me.
I do have to say, and I've told you this before, and any of my lectures or anything, I've never sat here and said, and I never will say, I'm innocent. I did participate in these events, and I did deserve to get in trouble. Okay, I will say that my gripe always was, and what I've always thought unfair was the level of the charge. Why was I charged with 5 counts of robbery and carjacking and 2 weapons offenses when what I was truly guilty of was having a gun that wasn't registered?
Okay. An unlawful possession of a firearm.
Right. And if the prosecutor would have had, I want to say, a little bit more discretion, a little bit more compassion, like you guys are talking about, and have heard me out and just said, listen, charge me appropriately and I'll plead guilty. And that was really my argument from day one. And I conveyed this to my original attorney, I conveyed it to the other attorney, and this was the entire basis of my appeals process. Just that it was excessive, the charge, excessive, the sentence.
All right, Gene Rossi, let me ask you a question. I respect you, you're a mature, seasoned, battle-hardened federal prosecutor. I really think this is a conversation we need to speak more about parity, about reasonableness. And with these sentencings, I think the audience would be surprised. I was very uncomfortable as a prosecutor knowing we went from no mandatory sentences when I first started as a baby prosecutor to hitting flies with sledgehammers. If you went to trial and got convicted, say good night.
I've been doing criminal cases in the 90s. I was hang 'em high and hang 'em often. Mandatory minimums were my best friend. And then I retired in 2016. The last 10 years, I did an epiphany. And it just breaks my heart what happened to Julio, because I can just feel what that prosecutor was thinking, that this person, Julio, I'm going to throw the book at him. If he takes me to trial, I'm going to make him pay.
Yeah, and pay he did, but he's got a fascinating twist to this story, Gene Rossi. Unfortunately, we got to take a real quick break, and I can't wait to get back with my guest. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Chief Wagner, I have a question for you. I know you've got to go. My question is this. Who is the only prosecutor whose house you were in their dining room with in the middle of the night as we were breaking down a murder case? You only get one answer. What prosecutor would that be?
And I was on their back deck as well, I think. I think it was Prosecutor Robert Bianchi in Morris County.
Chief, you have no idea how this brought me back to the many years ago, and I could see you guys all sitting around there as we gamed that case. It was always great to be working cases with you guys, being proactive, and then ultimately after the arrest, taking those balls across the goal line to convictions. You did a great job here today. Our chatters loved your insight. You are the consummate professional. I hope you come back again, and thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Happy Thanksgiving to you, all the listeners, and all the guests on the show today as well. Thank you again for the opportunity. Take care.
Yeah, okay, Chief. Take care. Guys, listen, we're going to do a little more Van Dyke and come back with my awesome guests on the other end. Okay, Gene, real quick, we got a couple of extra minutes here to be able to discuss all of this. Thanks for hanging in there with us. I mean, again, I'm just confounded. You have to explain this to me. I have mad respect for you. How does the guy get on the stand after all this time he's had? And at certain points, I remember in his testimony, he says, oh, he didn't really review his statements. It's just, that is just, okay, fine. You didn't review your statements, but you've been sitting in court the entire time watching this video over and over and over again. He was not advancing on you, and he didn't keep coming at you. How can this testimony, I've never seen anything like it. How did he do this? What did he talked himself into a guilty and being a lying guilty guy.
Yeah, Bob, a couple of things probably happened. They prepared him to no end. They actually put him through a direct and a cross. This is what I would have done, maybe 5 times. Some would have been easy, directs and cross. Others would have been brutal. They had him ready, like an Olympic athlete, to pour his guts out and to give them every little detail of that event. That's possibly what happened. Or they didn't prepare him. They didn't make him do homework. They didn't make him study the video. And they let him get on that stand essentially naked. And if that happened, that should be a habeas corpus. I mean, habeas corpus, a habeas petition, because that's ineffective assistance of counsel. I don't know what happened. The third option is they prepared him like crazy. He was ready to go, and he just choked. I got to tell you, I think he could have just choked when he got into that stand. He was having numlock. He was having pregnant pauses that were just painful.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, when I watched it before and I watch it now, he almost looks like medicated or numb or out of it. There's just something not right here.
Well, it's funny because when Gene's saying, you can only prep a witness so much. I mean, when people, I hope they don't misunderstand, when lawyers prep a witness, it's not that we're telling them what to say. We're just letting them know that here is the proofs against you. Here is what to be prepared for. Let us know what you do. All I keep thinking about when he testifies is that Mark Twain saying is, as long as you always tell the truth, it's easy because you never have to think of what to say. And he always looked like he was thinking of what he was going to say. And I think that cast a lot of doubt about how he perceived that incident that night. And I'm not so sure he didn't seal his fate.
Now, Julio, we got a short period of time, but let me ask you, when in your case, you didn't testify, but you wanted to, and you did that based on your attorney's advice, do you think that would have made a difference in your trial?
Absolutely. I absolutely think that if I would have been given the opportunity to get on there and let the jury hear my version of the events of that night, I don't think I would have been convicted. And
so you also talk about the change in the judge, one from being more favorable to you and one not. Do you think if you could redo this case again, it was with an experienced attorney, with a different kind of judge, do you think you would have gotten a different result?
Oh, much.
Right.
Much.
In fact, we're going to talk on the other end before we go to break, after we come back from break, how you actually got that 39-year prison sentence reduced to 12 years on a very interesting thing that you did there. But we're going to go to break. Stay tuned. Please stay with us because I got some great questions that I would like to ask our great guests, and we'll be right back. All right, so a pretty dramatic moment. Jason Van Dyke goes down on pretty much on everything. So Julio, you've been through the system. I want to fast forward with you real quick. Mm-hmm. You went and went through a torturous classification process. You wound up landing in state prison, and some paralegal in the prison said to you something very profound. And you're a very profound guy, and that's why you're writing books about how to be resilient and deal with crises. He said, do you want to be right, or do you want to get out?
Do you want to go home?
Or do you want to go home?
Yes.
Okay, and what he meant by that was, instead of arguing your innocence so much, is argue that there were flaws in the trial to have your sentence reduced.
Yeah, that's actually when I studied to become a paralegal so I can ultimately get myself home. That was the catalyst for me. I quit worrying about the details and the technical aspects of what could have gone right in my trial, and I just focused on what went wrong on my sentencing. Mm-hmm. You know, why everything, so much of it was run consecutive.
Right,
Why,
and those legal arguments worked, and you got out, and now you're doing
Yes.
this counseling. So, I've listened to you lecture many times. Tell the audience what is in store, and you're familiar with Chicago, which is great.
Yeah.
What is in store for a defendant, in particular, a police officer that winds up going to jail?
Well, just from what I've read throughout and what I've seen following this case, he's got a couple of really big negatives. Number one, he's going into one of the most overcrowded prison systems in the United States. Illinois is right up there with, you know, Mississippi and Louisiana as far as overcrowded. And it's also 56% African American. The white population in there is only about 30%. So all of this is going to go against his favor. He's more than likely walking into something called a TOS, terminate on site order, or also commonly known as a green light, because this kid, McDonald, known gang member.
So the TOS is something that would actually be ordered by gang people against the officer. Go ahead.
It would be ordered by what's called the shot caller, or depending on the gang, they change it, you know, from organization to organization. If it was Bloods, it would be like the big homie or whoever it is. But the person in charge would put its TOS, terminate on site. You don't need a lot of imagination to figure out what's going to happen to him.
Let me ask you, Julio, how about his relationship with the guards? And based on your experience, having been in the prison for a considerable period of time, 12 years, how powerful is the gang to carry out this terminate on site order?
There's no hiding. They will go to the extreme. They will have one of their own members check into protective custody just to have the opportunity to get to him. They will have trustees. They will have gang members that will work their way to trustees. You have to understand, he's probably looking at a significant amount of time. Probably at a minimum, if everything goes perfectly for him, my guess is somewhere around 15 to 20 years. That's just my guess. You know, I mean, you guys know better than I do on this. But there's nothing but time. They don't have to get him right away. They could wait 5 years. They can actually get somebody to build up and follow him from prison to prison to do this. The police inside, the corrections officers, are not going to protect him. Law enforcement does not like dirty cops.
Now, see, that's a counter view. People will say that cops may be taken care of, but you've said to me many times that are saying now, no, cops look at them negatively because of what they
Yes.
violated the code. They got convicted.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Was there situations, Julio, where the guards will turn the other way and let this happen?
Yes, I've seen this happen repeatedly, depending on the crime, but I have seen police officers and corrections officers get arrested and convicted, go into the system, and the first people to put them out there are the corrections officers on the housing units. They are not respected. They come in, and this is the most common mistake by law enforcement when they go into the prison system as a defendant, as a convicted felon.
Would you agree with me that there's the police officer defendant that's in state prison is going to serve harder time than an ordinary defendant for a similar crime? Why is that?
Because they're fighting a battle on numerous fronts. They have to deal with the fact that probably about 20% of the people they're going to run into, they may have put in there, or somebody that's associated with those people. So they're going to find out where they're from, they're going to figure it out, and that's going to be one thing they're fighting against. Then just the label of being a police officer is going to increase the likelihood of violence against them. Now you put that with the mindset that typically happens with law enforcement. They're going to come in and they're going to think that the corrections officers are on their side, and it's just a complete mistake.
So it's like they've got it coming from every angle. Let me throw it to you, Mike and Gene, real quick. We have a short period of time till we have to take sign off. But do you think that should be factored in by the prosecutor or the judge with regard to sentencing? That this kind of time, essentially you're telling me segregation 23, and they can still get at them. Should that be a factor taken into sentencing consideration?
I think my legal answer should be no, but I think my human answer is absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, what about you, Gene?
Yes, what he's facing in prison is definitely a factor that a judge could and should consider. And I agree with Julio. he is going to have a horrible time in prison. Horrible.
Yeah, okay. Well, listen, guys, you have been amazing. Mike Corbanics Law Group, law firm, certified criminal trial. Julio, mad respect for you because you took a negative, you made a positive at it. I love lecturing with you. Great with these books and helping people make a better life for themselves. Gene Rossi, hashtag 4041. You were always my man. You're awesome. And I want to thank Chief Wagner. Guys, we're going to have to go. I will be back next Monday, and we'll be covering this fascinating second part of the Jason Van Dyke case. I want to thank you so much, and for all the people in the chat room and all the people that work here at the Law&Crime Network. It's an honor to be your host, and I hope you all have a blessed and happy Thanksgiving. See you next week. You be well.